Have you ever wished your life had turned out differently? Wished you had never lost that job? Never gone through that heartbreaking breakup with the person you believed you would spend the rest of your life with? Never been born into a family marked by pain? Or never grown up feeling like your body was somehow not enough? There comes a moment in everyone's life when they look back at the past and think, if only everything had been different. But there is one question we rarely have the courage to ask ourselves. What if suffering isn't something we're meant to fight, but something we're meant to love? 2,000 years ago, a slave whose master shattered his leg rose to become one of the most respected teachers of wisdom in human history. His secret was not how he escaped his fate, but how he learned to embrace it. Today, we're going to explore one of the most radical and most misunderstood principles of Stoic philosophy, an art that the ancient philosophers believed was the path to genuine inner peace. The problem: there is a silent illness affecting nearly every modern human being, yet it has no medical name. It is the endless war against reality. We resist the weather when it doesn't match our plans. We reject criticism, even when it's true. We resist failure, rejection, illness, growing older, and people who refuse to behave the way we want them to. We spend an extraordinary amount of emotional energy wishing that what has already happened had never happened at all. Think back to the last time you were stuck in traffic, your chest tightening with frustration at roads that could never hear your anger, or the last time you spent hours replaying a mistake from the past, as if enough regret could somehow rewrite history. Here's the paradox: the harder we fight what has already happened, the more tightly we become trapped by it. Our suffering does not come from the event itself. It comes from our refusal to accept that it happened. Human psychology. Psychologically, this makes perfect sense. The human brain evolved to seek control. In the ancient world, feeling in control of your environment meant survival. It meant knowing where predators were hiding, when the seasons would change, and who could be trusted. Uncertainty wasn't just uncomfortable, it felt like a threat to your life. So when life moves beyond our control, a devastating diagnosis, the end of a relationship, or a public failure, our brain responds with more than sadness. It responds with denial. Psychologists recognize denial as one of the earliest stages of grief. Not because we're irrational, but because accepting a painful reality can feel like surrendering the last bit of control we have. But this is where the trap lies. Denial never truly protects us. It only postpones the pain while quietly making it heavier. The longer we resist what cannot be changed, the greater the distance we create between ourselves and inner peace. Human nature. But beneath all of this lies something even deeper, something rooted in human nature itself. Human beings are the only creatures that live twice, once in reality and once again inside their own minds, where they endlessly rewrite the story of how life should have unfolded. Animals do not suffer from what if. A deer that loses its leg in a hunter's trap does not spend its days mourning the fairness of the universe. It adapts, or it doesn't survive. That's all. But humans possess imagination, a gift and a curse. We create alternate versions of our lives that never existed and then grieve them as though they were real. We mourn the path we never took, the person who never truly loved us the way we imagined, the future that existed only in our expectations. Yet this is also where our greatest strength lies. The very thing that makes us vulnerable is the same thing that can set us free. The ability to choose the meaning of what happens to us. Storytelling. In 165 AD, a devastating plague swept across the Roman Empire. Historians believe this outbreak, later known as the Antonine Plague, claimed the lives of millions over the course of more than a decade. It spread along the empire's trade routes, filled entire cities with the dead, and spared neither slaves nor emperors. The man ruling Rome at the time was Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers in history. The plague took the life of his co-emperor. It claimed several of his own children. At the same time, he was forced to lead an empire locked in relentless wars along its northern borders, watching the civilization he loved sink deeper into one crisis after another. Imagine carrying that burden. Imagine being the most powerful man in the known world, yet completely powerless against disease, death, and the endless chaos unfolding around you. And yet, each night, inside a military tent far from the grandeur of Rome's palaces, Marcus wrote private notes to himself, words he never intended anyone else to read. Those notes would one day become known as meditations. Within its pages, he did not write about escaping suffering. He wrote about accepting whatever life placed before him, not with passive resignation, but with unwavering inner strength. Again and again, he reminded himself that everything that happens is part of an order far greater than his personal desires. Here was a man who possessed everything: power, wealth, and imperial authority, yet chose to surrender not to fate as an enemy, but to fate as his greatest teacher. The Stoic insight. The Stoics had a name for this way of living: Amor Fati, the love of fate. Epictetus, once a slave before becoming one of the most sought-after philosophy teachers in Rome, taught that human suffering does not arise from events themselves, but from the judgments we make about them. He divided life into two categories: what is within our control, our thoughts, our judgments, and our actions, and what is beyond our control, our body, our possessions, our reputation, and the outcome of everything we strive for. Seneca, advisor to emperors and one of the greatest writers in Stoic history, argued that the wise do not expect life to conform to their desires. Instead, they align their desires with the reality of what happens. To him, true freedom did not come from controlling the world. It came from letting go of the need to control it. And Marcus Aurelius, in his private journal, reminded himself of this truth again and again. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. What stands in the way of action can advance action. What blocks the road becomes the road itself. This is not a philosophy of surrender. It is a philosophy of transforming our relationship with everything we cannot change. It is not passive resignation born from weakness. It is courageous acceptance born from wisdom, and then giving everything we have to what still remains within our control. Modern application. So how does this ancient principle apply to the world we live in today? On social media, we exist in a constant cycle of comparison. Every day we're shown carefully curated highlights of other people's lives, and without realizing it, we begin wishing our own lives looked the same. Amor Fati invites us to stop fighting for a life that was never ours and to become fully present in the one we are actually living. In our careers, many of us become trapped by the roads we never took, the job we didn't get, the promotion we missed, the business that failed. But a Stoic would ask a different question. What can this failure teach me? And what is the next step that remains within my control? Failure is not the end of the story. It is the raw material from which the next chapter is built. In love, How many of us spend years wishing someone had loved us differently, or mourning the end of a relationship instead of asking what it revealed about who we are? To love your fate is to recognize that even heartbreak can shape a kind of wisdom that could never have been learned any other way. And in friendship, modern culture often encourages us to expect people to become who we want them to be. But accepting others as they are, including their imperfections, is another expression of Amor Fati in human relationships. Modern life moves at an unforgiving pace. We're constantly pressured to control everything: our image, our schedules, our careers, our future. Yet the tighter we try to hold on to that control, the more anxious our lives become. Amor Fati is not about passively accepting injustice when it can be changed. It is about seeing clearly the difference between what can be changed and what must be accepted, and then devoting all of your energy to the first. Conclusion. Perhaps the real question isn't, why did this happen to me, but rather, what can I do now with what has already happened? Marcus Aurelius never chose to lose his children. Epictetus never chose to be born into slavery or to have his leg broken by his master. And none of us chooses every wound that shapes the person we become. But this is where the last, true freedom of every human being begins. The freedom to choose how we respond to what we never had the power to choose. To love your fate does not mean pretending that suffering doesn't hurt. It means ending the war with a past that cannot be changed, so you have the strength to shape the future that still can. Because in the end, life will never stop surprising you. But peace has never come from controlling every surprise. It comes from learning to embrace them. One fate, one moment, one choice at a time.